You always have a drink in every video.
I know it's kind of difficult. I'm gonna have a drink in every video. This time it's tea though, okay? People, tea.
Tea! Hey y'all, we're Kat and Ian. Welcome back to our channel. Today we wanted to talk to you about how to pick your very first mountain bike. We have both been there ourselves before, and we really want to help you out with some tips to make sure that you choose the right bike for you.
First things first, deep breath. I know if you go searching for bikes online, you might see some prices that absolutely blow your mind. Yes, mountain bikes can be expensive, but they don't have to be, right? You don't commute in a Ferrari to work. You do not need the most blinged out bike you ever find online to get this adventure started. So take a breath there and let's start real low key because it's a beginner bike.
So the first thing to consider is what style of riding you imagine yourself doing. We're going to be focused on mountain biking today, so not really any road riding or BMXing or really hardcore downhill biking. So the three things that you want to consider when it comes to your mountain bike and the way you want to ride are cross-country options, trail, all mountain, or enduro.
Those are three styles of mountain biking. Each of them kind of has a different bike application, and at this phase in your search, it's not worth worrying sweating the nitty-gritties between those, but there are terms you definitely might see describing types of bikes you're going to get. Those cross-country bikes are going to be a little more for longer mileage. They're going to be a little more pedal efficient, probably a little bit lighter. If you're thinking about a trail or all mountain, you're thinking more, okay, there's gonna be some roots and rocks. I'm gonna do some elevation gain, a little bit of downhill, a little more demanding terrain. And then on the far side of that, we've got the enduro. And if you see that term, you're looking for a bike that's pretty much built to go downhill that can be pedaled up. So lots of suspension, really slack bike that's ready to go for downhill but can get you to the top. And so those are the three styles you might think about, hey, what kind of riding am I gonna do? If you're gonna be doing lots of miles, you're gonna be leaning towards the cross-country side. If you're gonna be focused on bombing some descents because that's what interests you, you might lean towards that enduro side.
So when you're trying to determine the actual trails that you'll be riding, you probably want to look into what trails are near you or where you will be traveling to frequently in order to ride. There are a few apps where you can look up what ratings those trails are. And really, you're a beginner if you're getting your very first bike, so you're not going to be doing anything too hardcore or anything rowdy. So remember, just keep it simple. When you do look at those trail ratings, blues and greens as a color rating are usually easier trails, more flat, not as broody or rocky or technical, and then those blacks are going to be one of the harder trails.
So for those three types of bikes, cross-country, trail, and all-mountain, or enduro, kind of the differences really come down to geometry and suspension. So when you're out there looking at these bikes online or searching around or asking your buddies, those cross-country bikes typically have very small amounts of travel. They might be hardtails, which means they don't have rear suspension, or dual suspension, which means they have both. But typically they're on the lower end. And to give you an idea of numbers, we're talking about 100, maybe 120 millimeters of travel. This is usually posted. If you search up a bike, it'll tell you about how much travel they have. So anywhere between 80 and 120 is cross country. Just supposed to eat up a few of those little bumps to take off some of the weight, but not squish under heavy pedal to keep you more efficient. If you move into the all mountain or trail category, you start pushing more towards 140 millimeters of travel. There are still some hardtails that get into this category of riding. They're a little bit rowdier or burlier, or going with a dual suspension with maybe 140-ish front and rear. That's gonna soak up a few more bumps, typically have a little more aggressive stance in the bike's design. That front wheel will be a little further out. The wheel span might be a little longer, so it's a little bit more stable. And then push that one step further when you get into something called an enduro style mountain bike. We're talking lots of suspension, 160, 170 millimeters of travel. We're talking front and rear for both of those numbers. And these are designed to go at high speed downhill, right? So you could go really fast, 30 miles an hour, soaking up bumps, hitting things. So if speed is your goal, that's the bike for you. But those kind of speeds, of course, take time to build up to and get comfortable handling. And it means you're bringing a lot more bike weight and stuff around with you, making them a little less pedal friendly. Once you've figured out what kind of trails you're going to be riding or the style of riding you're going to be doing on those trails, now you got to figure out what kind of your budget is going to look like. Now, that can be a huge range. It very much depends on what you're comfortable spending, right? So we're not going to tell you what is an ideal budget, but we can very easily say that the more you spend, the more capable your bike is typically going to be. I'm going to encourage you to avoid the Walmart bike. If it's like $100, it might be great for a beach cruiser or around the campground. But if you're going to want to get into the mountain bike scene, it's probably not going to hold up to much abuse. And the last thing you want to do, especially in your beginning adventure, is get stuck in the woods with a broken bike. So that being said, if you can spend a little more, that's going to help you get better parts, a better frame, and hopefully make that first experience a little bit smoother.
My first mountain bike I bought for around $900. It was more cross-country style and it was carbon fiber. So we really focused on the lightweight of it because I really wanted to be able to know that I could go the distance while I was building up my biking muscles to begin with, because that's one of the first things is just really getting your biking legs. So $900 felt really good for my first bike. I had that bike for maybe a year or two before we upgraded to a real actual all mountain trail bike. But it was a really good starter for me to just be able to get on the trails and get moving.
My first bike was a hardtail 29er, similar, way more cross-country style. I actually bought it right after high school. I pulled together all my graduation money, and for somewhere around $700, $750, I bought one new from a local bike shop. And I had gone to that bike shop to hopefully get a little more insider knowledge on what would or wouldn't be good. And that bike I rocked all through college for 4 years before I really started to realize that there's a whole world of mountain biking that I didn't know existed. And that's when I chose to upgrade to similar, a little more all mountain style bike that had front and rear suspension, a little more capable, and that became my bike for a few years before I went for even more travel. But I started at around $750 as my entry level, hopefully not a crappy bike.
So your next step after you've decided your style of riding and your budget is figuring out what size bike you need. We all need different size bikes based on our height. So the best option is really to go into your local bike shop and have someone there who is a professional to fit you properly so you get that exact perfect measurement. If you don't have that, the other option is to go to most bike brand websites and they will have a sizing guide telling you what is the perfect size bike for their brand based on your height.
So now that you know what size you're looking for, that could be small, medium, large. It might be numbers of 1, 2, or 3, depending on what bike brand you might be looking at. You got to decide if you're going to go for a new bike or a used bike. There are pros and cons to both of these things. The upside of a new bike is hopefully you're going into a bike shop, you know exactly the size you're going to get. Typically, if you buy a new bike from a bike shop, they're going to give you some sort of warranty. They're probably going to offer you services, bringing it back in, making sure it's tuned up, taking care of you. So if you're intimidated with making sure that bike functions properly, this is probably the easiest entry point. That's why I started there. I did not feel comfortable diving into the nitty-gritty of my bike. I wanted to be able to bring it in and say, hey, I've got this noise, what's going on? And they're willing to take care of you because you invested in them. Of course, you can buy new bikes online. That's an option. Direct to consumer is something that might be called. Those two can come with warranties. I would look into those, but they don't provide you with the I have somebody immediately to go ask that this is covered by. Of course, you could still take it into a bike shop for help, but it may not have included those expenses when you purchase it from a bike shop. On the used side, This is where bang for buck can be really good. Bikes drop in value. If you buy a new one, it's going to immediately be worth less as soon as you walk out of that store, just like a car. So bikes drop in value pretty quick within a few years. That being said, you can get a great deal with some better components, some more high quality bits and pieces. However, it comes with kind of the knowledge barrier of knowing what to look for.
That's true.
It's true.
That's very true.
So if you choose to go this route, of course, if you can find a buddy or your partner or somebody who's got some knowledge, that's probably a great place to start. They might be willing to go check out that bike with you, know a little better what they're looking for. If that's not an option for you, you're veering out on your own, or you don't know anybody that you trust, I totally understand that. A couple things to look for would be, first things, is there any damage to the bike? If you get to look at this bike, maybe you've met somebody from Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace, be careful. It's probably a good idea to bring somebody with you anyways. But check that bike over. I know you're taking up somebody else's time, but don't be afraid to ask as many questions as you can. Flip that bike upside down, pedal it around that parking lot, whatever you need to do to make sure your investment is going to be worthwhile, do it. And feel free to say no if things don't look right. Don't get caught up in the moment with that money burning a hole in your pocket. Look that bike up and down. Are there any dents in it? Are there any cracks? For most bikes, that should just be a no-go immediately. Right? The last thing you want to do is your bike to snap in half out on the trail. Beyond that, if you don't see any dents or any cracks, but you're pedaling that guy around, listen to see if there's any creaks. If there's any noises coming from it, that might mean expensive repairs. And if you don't know how to do those repairs, you might be roped into even more money than you thought originally, messing with that budget. So take it for a pedal, listen for any creaks, anything that might be sounding crunchy, try to push that bike around. I know it's hard to get a real feel in a parking lot, but put it through its paces as best you can. Go ahead and shift through all of the gears that you can get through. Make sure those brakes are working, they're not making any noises or not stopping you. Make sure your shifting feels smooth. If any of those things are issues, it might be a good idea to veer away or ask that person to repair them before you buy it.
Good points.
Thanks. I think of them.
Yes. To make sure that y'all feel really comfortable and know that this doesn't have to be an extreme, hardcore, expensive thing, I have been biking for 3 to 4 years now, and I've only owned 2 bikes. Both have been bought used, and we're around $1,000 both of them. And I've been riding and doing lots of different things, from parks to mountain bike trails that are just single track to gravel grinding. So don't feel like you need to jump in and get this super, super expensive bike. You can still have fun and have a good time with a decently affordable bike.
Remember, this is just your first mountain bike. You've got time to upgrade. This is just something to get you into the sport, building muscles, figuring out how your bike works. So don't sweat it if you don't make the ideal first decision or this isn't your dream bike. You've got so much time ahead of you to upgrade, to think about how things work, and even see if this sport is something you're willing to stick with. With that, I hope that this helps you make this next purchase. Go through each of the things we talked about today as you go into your first mountain biking experience, first mountain bike buying experience. And if you want more help with those decisions, please like this, subscribe, let us know in the comments if there's something we missed, or if you guys need some advice or tips, and hopefully you get a rad bike to shred.
Bye!
Bye! Cool!
Yeah!
Well, that's good.
Bye! I'm talking really good.
Talking so freaking good
I'm
today.
talking so good.
Talking so good.
I'm talking good.